Apple. They've revolutionized the personal computer. They've revolutionized the smartphone. They've revolutionized the smartwatch. And now, are they revolutionizing VR?
Apple Vision Pro. Is it a VR headset? Is it a mixed reality headset? Is it something entirely different? Is it worth the price? That last question doesn't fucking matter. It's too expensive. You're not gonna buy it anyway, even if it is worth the price. So let's talk about the important stuff. All right, we spent 10 minutes getting loosey-goosey.
I was just thinking that.
Let's jump in. I'm halfway through my first drink.
Hello, I'm Matt. I'm a gameplay programmer.
Hello and welcome. I'm Carlos, and I'm a level designer.
And we're drinking today on this podcast where we talk about Apple Vision Pro, which is not a VR headset.
Yes, right out the gate, we are celebrating and also maybe mildly sad that this is not a VR headset. We are a VR show primarily centered around gaming in VR, but
we're not talking about either today.
Nope. We're talking about a headset though, so it counts. We're still in our realm.
Yeah, so the Apple Vision Pro is not a pair of glasses. It's an actual headset. This has been rumored for years that Apple's working on some sort of headset. Is it VR? Is it AR? Is it a self-driving car? No one knows until now. And a lot of people have been talking about it, and I feel like the biggest chunk of what people have been focusing on is coming from the angle of it being a VR AR headset sort of landing into this existing market, and they're looking at the sticker price, which is $3,500, and they're saying, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, and they're saying like that. Wow, that's a lot of money for like what my preconceived notions of what this headset was already gonna do. I will admit, $3,500 like for pretty much anything is gonna be like a steep price. Like that's practically gonna be your down payment on a car or something like that, or a couple of months of rent. But this headset, being not a VR headset, it's good for the market in that like this is very different. I'm sad because it's not like a cool gaming machine, but I'm excited for what this could mean for the future of headsets down the road.
I would almost say that like what it's doing is taking all of the technology that we've seen developed for VR, right? All this like spatial blah, 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 and it's divorcing it from gaming. Right. I feel like gaming has been a pretty strong driver in a lot of the development and a lot of the customer awareness of it. It's saying like, no. It's not about gaming. It's this other thing. It's just computing with a different sort of interface. Honestly, that's the best way to think about it, is this headset is basically an infinite display, right? It's like a monitor that's the size of the world. And just like how touchscreens have a different way of interacting with them than keyboard and mouse and a normal monitor, this has a different way of interacting with this display. But just because the interaction is different doesn't mean it's anything more than effectively just a new kind of display.
Yeah, so essentially what that boils down to is this headset is not for gaming. These boots were not made for walking. These boots were made for spatial computing, and that's what they're going to do. And with like the spatial computing, I mean, it is basically like, like you have your Macintosh, you have your iPhone. Now imagine if you could do a lot of these things, but with a headset on, and I guess like with your fingers making gestures or like tapping around in the air. It's a cool idea, and it's something that we've needed advancement in with the headset space, because, I'm all for the games in the headset, making them better and progressing game design in that realm, but being able to see what else can we use these headset for, and then down the road, how can we make them lighter and more manageable to integrate into our main lives, I think that will help us a lot. And so here we see in some of their videos, like, oh, a guy's putting on the headset, and then his Photos app is there, his Notepad app is there. He could check the news, browse the internet, send text messages, all while like having the headset on, walking around, and he's always seeing the real world around them. And that's pretty powerful. Like, honestly, like, I think back when I was in college and they were talking about the Google Glasses.
Oh my God. How did I forget about Google Glass? Sorry to interrupt.
Google Glass was the coolest thing. I wanted to try them so bad. I had friends in like the cybersecurity major who got to try them out. And I was just like, bro, like, I need to see, like, is this the future? And
quick aside about Google Glass in college, because I had a very similar experience, except instead of it being cool and the people in the cybersecurity major, there was one guy who would wear them to lecture every day. And at one point, the professor asked him to take them off, and he refused.
Like he didn't want to be recorded?
Yeah. The professor was not down with the privacy concerns of the Google Glass.
Okay, so he wasn't like playing Flappy Bird with his eyelids.
No. So that was very Black Mirror.
I mean, good you mentioned Black Mirror, because I definitely want to bring up a specific Black Mirror episode when we start talking about one of the other features they unveiled with this headset.
Okay, but first I want to because we're talking about Google Glass, I want to bring up the other two sort of main points of comparison in terms of headsets, which is the HoloLens, the Microsoft HoloLens, and the Magic Leap.
I have little knowledge / experience with the Magic Leap headset, but with the HoloLens, I only knew that like there was one HoloLens. And the only time I really heard about it was leading up to an E3, this was so many years ago, but leading up to an E3 where they showed off HoloLens, basically building a Minecraft world on like a dinner table. And that was pretty much all they showed. And then from there, never heard about HoloLens again for practically a decade afterward. But it was a very cool idea, and now we even see that with the Apple Vision Pro. At one point, they showed seeing live footage or something like that of like an NBA game on your own like dinner table, and I think that is super cool. Honestly, like, I don't know if it's a gimmick or what, but that sort of moment, being able to see this like playset-esque thing in front of you in your real house, combining that with like actual live TV, I think is like an amazing idea. And it definitely like also gives me vibes from like that 90s movie Indian in the Cupboard.
I mean, it's clear what they're going for with the Apple Vision Pro. Their whole thing is about taking sort of normal applications and making them more integrated into the environment, right? So it's like it's like step one. Expand your screen. So instead of looking on a screen, your screen is everywhere. The display is the whole space around you. And we saw that a little bit with the HoloLens, right? So you could launch an app, it scans the area around you. You can anchor stuff to the space around you. You can use, with the HoloLens, you can use sort of like a weird finger gesture to interact with the program. You can look around to interact with the program. It has a little controller that's like not a full motion tracked controller, but it's like a little remote that you can interact with. It's got spatial audio, and it was more computing based. It wasn't about gaming. It was about productivity tasks and entertainment, but it could anchor into the space around you. And then the Magic Leap made it a little bit better. The screen on the HoloLens was super small. Magic Leap, it was a little bit better, still kind of dim, but same sort of thing where it's spatial tracking. And the Magic Leap actually had controllers, motion tracked controllers. And so it was a little bit more gaming focused, but still productivity. It wasn't clear what kind of space it was trying to be in. But so those were the precursors in terms of the technology. And HoloLens had the best bet of being similar because it was Microsoft, and so it was tied into their OS. Apple Vision Pro is more about sort of being a display. But the second part of being a display is, well, now you've got a thing on someone's face and you need to make sure they don't feel isolated. That's something we've talked about, is when you're in VR, you feel super isolated. You don't know who's around you. You don't know where you are in the actual space. So the second step of having everything be a display is you need to bring the external world back into the headset. And so they've got technology that I have not seen before, which is taking people that enter your space and turning them into virtual characters that you can see, and sort of really notifying, despite your level of immersion, right? Despite whether you're in full AR, full VR, or whether you're in some sort of mixed reality, you bring real people into the virtual space. And you make sure that, if you're in AR, the apps around you cast shadows onto the environment, spatial audio. So the, sounds that the app makes bounce around the space that you're in realistically, which is actually really fucking cool.
That
the technology
seems very cool. On a technical level, that very much wows me. And when you apply it to things like Zoom calls or FaceTime, whatever, having, I'm FaceTiming my mom and I have her window up in my living room, and then suddenly I walk over to the kitchen to do a thing, and still that window's going to stay there unless maybe I have some sort of setting that lets windows follow me within X distance. But to be able to still hear her but from a distance, rather than kind of always being, let's say you have earbuds in, if you're on a normal phone call, it's oh, this person is literally inhabiting my mind, in terms of what what I'm hearing. But it feels more lifelike, I guess.
Yeah, it's tapping into all these subconscious cues that we're not consciously aware of, but it's stuff like echoes and reverb and, sound dampening, and same thing with light, where light hits things in a particular way and casts shadows, and all of that plays into whether or not something belongs in the environment or is some weird alien presence. And by having totally digital applications sort of behave as if they're physical objects in all these really subtle subconscious ways, it does a great job of integrating the digital environment into the physical environment, which the previous comparisons that we've seen with the Magic Leap and the HoloLens don't do that particularly well. Stage 3, by the way, after you've integrated the digital environment into the physical environment, is reintegrating the digital thing that you're seeing back into the physical environment, which sounds very confusing, but it's basically if I walk up to someone that's wearing this stupid headset, which as much as they tried to make it look cool, it still looks a little bit dorky. There's always been this issue of, I don't know what the fuck this person is seeing when they have a headset strapped to their face. Doesn't matter if it's VR or AR. I have no idea what they're experiencing. I might be able to see it on a TV screen or a computer screen if they've bothered to set it up or if it's streaming. But at the end of the day, I'm very disconnected from their experience. It's they're in a different space. It's they're having a hallucination, and maybe I can speak to them, but I can't really be in the same experience as them. And this headset has a lot of things that try to mitigate that. It has a screen on the outside of it that shows an approximation of where you're looking and what you're seeing, so that if I'm an outside observer and I walk up and I'm trying to interact with you, I can interact with you just as easily as you're interacting with me, because you can see me through the headset screen.
Yeah, it is a cool feature, albeit a little bit goofy. I think visually it's a little bit goofy, but to be able to, the headset user is seeing the room around them, which is very different from a VR headset, maybe you have to press a special button or double tap the headset or do some sort of gesture to get past through. But to already be seeing through to your environment, and this is primarily meant to be that, this is a digital layer overlaid on your real environment, it makes sense to project the eyes / upper face area of the user out to the world. It also seems I'd have to see some sort of in-depth use videos for it, but It seems like a nice way to kind of keep the more human connection side of things possible. Because like you mentioned, like when the VR headset is on, I don't know what their, mood is. I don't know what's going on in there, and let's say I have the Apple headset on and I'm watching Marvel's Eternals and some like super sad moment comes up or something like that. Then like the person's able to somewhat like read my face, albeit this face that's on the front of the screen towards them is like this sort of like CGI digital projection of my face. Like it's not actually like some sort of like two-way mirror type thing or one-way mirror where you're like seeing my actual face and I just like can't see you. I think something we've been mentioning a lot that maybe not enough people have highlighted is just like how much, I guess, Apple has kind of like gone towards the human element, like tried to take care of the human element while overlaying this technology on your normal day-to-day activity, which like a lot of other headsets don't really care about.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you had to point to one thing, like one overarching thing that's wrong with Meta's entire approach to VR, AR, etc., it's the human angle. Like, everything that Meta does feels like they're trying to include the human connection angle, but they're actually robots that don't understand how humans work. So the fact that Apple, like, yeah, the reflecting what you're feeling out to the environment, the way that they've handled FaceTime calls, obviously, like, we haven't had hands-on, so it's hard to say, but just comparing, like, the language that Apple uses when they're describing their sort of AI-generated avatars and how, they represent you when you're making a FaceTime call, when you're in the headset to other people, versus Meta's avatars that are very cartoonish and, like, I mean, we've told horror stories, I think, about how freakish the Meta avatars are, but like when you start using algorithms to impose human emotions onto digital constructs, right? Where it's like, here, I've made my cartoony ass avatar and it smiles when it thinks that I'm smiling. It doesn't fucking know when I'm smiling, but it's trying to like interpret from my voice maybe when I'm smiling. And so now my avatar is smiling when I'm not smiling, or it's making a neutral face when I'm trying to be very warm. That's a bad time for everyone. Like, it's very creepy. It's not effective in communication. So there's a lot of nuance there that, like, you just need a lot of attention to detail, a lot of technical time working on that. So it's nice that this headset has both hardware and software built in to handle that. Like, it clearly has sensors and cameras to detect what your eyes are doing, what your face is doing, and try to represent that as accurately as possible in a digital avatar so other people can see what you're emoting when you're FaceTiming.
Yeah, and I remember at some point during the presentation, there was something about like you could like take the headset off, point the front of it towards yourself, and then it'll scan your face and create like a way higher resolution like avatar, like how Apple already has their kind of like, what are they called? Like animojis or something, where it's basically your face, but like memoji, it moves around when you talk and stuff. So this is like a much higher version of that, which is something that I think the other VR headsets are trying to go towards, where it's like, hey, we want your actual like physical body represented as closely as possible in the virtual space. This is like trying to push that a step further. So like if you have the headset on and you've done the scan, then whoever you're FaceTiming with is like reading cues off of whatever's happening that's perceived through the inside and outside cameras. It's taking this avatar that's not actually you. It's like a digital recreation of you and like putting your actions onto it. That's like pretty cool. There's definitely a side of me that's like, that feels like oddly dystopian. Like, I don't know exactly what it is, but there's like a couple of points with this headset that feel weirdly dystopian, even though, in each case, like, it is a pretty big like technological advancement. It just feels like a little odd.
Okay, well, I don't know. Walk me through that. Like,
Okay, sorry. Maybe that was kind of like that might be a little bit out of left field, but the one I would say the biggest thing that like rubbed me in a weird way, while at the same time being like, wow, this is brilliant. This is such good technology and this pushes things forward, is when they showed off depth in photos and videos. So there's like a segment of the commercial, right, where they show like, oh, if you take panoramas, you can blow them up and see them as if you were there. And oh, like if you took a video of your daughters playing like with bubbles in the park, you see like they pan around like some amount of degrees around the video playing, and it kind of has this Harry Potter type look to it where it's a flat surface, but when you start to like kind of rotate around it, you see that there's like clearly depth to the flat plane. So like it just looked really cool, and that's kind of the best way I could describe it, is like almost like as if it is a portal to that moment in time. Like it has the perfect layer of depth, the video looks crisp, and so on and so forth. Again, all of this video and stuff, I think is pretty much entirely pre-rendered or whatever. So it's very much a lot of like blue skies, pie in the sky, when pigs fly, everything just aerial, like just big wishes. But
that is interesting, like, because they made a big point about that, right? That's the 3D camera technology, where it's basically like, oh, it has two cameras that are presumably as far apart as your eyes. And so when you capture video with this, or images with this thing on, like when you view them back, they are stereoscopic and you can see the exact depth that you saw in the moment, right? I have to imagine how, does that actually work in reality? Because like we all know, hopefully you've seen like 3D stereoscopic video, and when you view that and the camera's moving and your head isn't moving, it's very disorienting. So like, how do they handle that? If you're capturing the video with this headset on, it's going to be very shaky. If the camera's attached to someone's head, like it's not watchable without a lot of processing or like machine learning, interpreting, or you're right. It's walking this line between like, oh yeah, this is cool future technology, and like the technology is inserting itself into reality to like make it possible to experience, and it gets into a weird territory.
Yeah, and it's good you brought up like the front facing cameras and the 3D cameras, because like part of that is going back to the example that they showed where like this guy is watching presumably some sort of like stereoscopic 3D video of like his daughters, right? First off, immediate Black Mirror vibes. 100% not gonna lie, I know it was meant to be a wholesome moment, but my brain immediately went to like, okay, let's jump cut to someone whose like two daughters like died in a horrible car crash a year ago, and now he's sitting with like his 17th beer in his hand, and it's only 2 p.m. and he's watching just reruns of his kids, because all these fucking action movies and things we watch in media do this, right? Like he's just sitting there stewing on his loss, but watching these like three-dimensional videos. And so it made me think literally of Black Mirror, the episode called The Entire History of You, where people had like the little almost like a little Siri puck like installed by their temple that like records everything through their eyes. So like dystopian point number one is like looking back on these like super live videos that have depth and almost seem like your family members are there. Like great technology. I would love to see that. I'd be excited to use it. I'd be happy to use it, but also definitely could go in a very dark direction. The second point to that is like the actual process of recording that video. You need to be wearing the headset while you're at the park with your kids. Presumably, they didn't say anything about like recording this on your phone and getting the same like Harry Potter, like super depth in the picture, like result. So I, as a normal consumer that like watched mostly the broad strokes of this presentation, I have to assume that like the user had the headset on, they went out to their local park with their kids, and then they kept the headset on while looking at their two daughters and recording it, all while they looked back at their dad lovingly, and their dad isn't even like really looking at them. It's a digital projection of his fucking eyeballs looking back at them. like oh, I'm sorry, y'all. If you're listening to this thinking I'm crazy, like, I just, I sometimes have to find, like, the logical beginning and end to what this marketing material is showing me. I can't just be like, ooh, wholesome family moment. I have to be like, how did we get here? Where could this end up? And that to me is, like, kind of where most of the dystopian stuff comes in, is, like, this technology is really helping a lot, but we see this with almost like every device, right? There are some things we can do, and then some things that, like, when they integrate too much into like life or into society, there's like pushback. And this is my lizard brain natural pushback of like, I don't want to wear a headset at the park just to get this like short video of my daughters that I can then look back on, because I'm already missing out on the moment while I'm with them at the park because I have this headset on.
Like,
and
are you going to wear your headset to every university lecture?
Am I going to wear this headset to like a friend's wedding? Like, what's going on here?
Now, you bring up a good point about the normalization of wearing the headset broadly. It's like, okay, really, when do they expect people to be wearing this headset? Because the marketing materials can tell a certain story, but like realistically, they're designing applications for use under certain circumstances. When do they really expect people to be using this headset? My personal take on that is like, I think we're going to see usage patterns similar to what we've already seen, which again, I will caveat this with like Apple products do weird shit to people, right? We see people wearing AirPods to their university graduation ceremonies as like a status symbol. Like, so just Apple making a product already throws some of the rules out the window. But I think like as a headset, I think we'll broadly see the same usage patterns as we've already seen, which is like some people will be using them on airplanes and in airports, and it will be a little bit weird. But some people will be doing it. People will largely be using them like at home, on their couch, to like view movies. I don't think we'll be seeing a lot of like web browsing just because it's not useful for that. Like using a laptop is much more convenient for browsing the web. I think we'll see some usage in very specific scenarios that it's designed for, like, I don't know, maybe certain medical training, certain mechanics training, certain creative functions where you're viewing 3D content. But I think there'll be very defined regimens where it's like, okay, I'm going to slip on the headset, I'm going to do my stuff, I'm going to take it off. I don't think we're going to be seeing the sort of dystopian/utopian vision that the marketing materials portray, where people are wearing it for hours just through regular life. I don't know. What do you see, Carlos?
I definitely, at least right now, don't see this being a multi-hour type of wearable. A big point for that is that it seems like you carry a battery pack around you a lot of the time, and at the lowest is this thing's battery life is like 2 hours at most. If you're hooked up, then like, sure, you can go all day. I don't know if you need to be hooked up to batteries and be constantly switching them out, or if like you're supposed to have a long tether to a computer and then you're kind of good to go for the whole day. But a 2-hour battery life is like abysmal, honestly. Like 2 hours sounds like a long time, but really, like, if I'm sitting down and I start watching Marvel's Eternals, and this whole episode's brought to you by Marvel's Eternals. If I sit down to watch any Marvel movie, this headset's gonna fucking die before I get to the end of the movie, dude. Like, I don't know, man. So, honestly, I have used Marvel movies as a metric in more scenarios than I wish to admit. But I think in terms of battery life, it's fairly reasonable to ask that a battery lasts longer than a Marvel movie. Like, I don't care what the battery is. Like, the Quest 2 can last longer than a Marvel movie, you know? And even then, I'm kind of like annoyed by, you know, not having more power in it.
Like, people use movies as a comparison point against like game pricing, where it's like, well, how many hours of entertainment does this game provide? So like, and how many hours of entertainment does a movie ticket provide? I love the fact that we're extending this to battery life, where it's like 3 hours. That's barely one Marvel, you know, Endgame. Like,
for $3,500, this is like pre-tax.
Hey now.
For $3,500, your battery can't last longer than a Marvel movie, bro.
All right, let's hash out the price tag real quick.
Okay.
Just to get it out of the way, because I think almost every single other person that's talked about this headset has been like, oh my god, it's $3,500.
Yeah, the price is going to be like the first thing that comes up, because it's like $3,500. Who has that? Like,
yeah, it's compared to like other headsets where it's like MetaQuest 3, I can buy that for $500 or whatever, or like PSVR 2, that's like $500. Look, here's my take on it. This is entirely my opinion. All right, it's an Apple product. A high-end Apple monitor is like $5,000, right? Like, just like make your mind entirely blank when it comes to price. This is an Apple product. It doesn't matter. It's not for you. You're not going to be buying it if you're gawking at the price tag, right? It's for people that don't care about the price tag because it's the status symbol, or it's for companies, right? It's, I'm going to sell 50 Apple Vision Pros to your company because you're a, you know, creative professional company, or you're a whatever that pulls in, you know, millions of dollars per year. Like, it's not for you if you're caring about the price tag. It's not a VR headset. Don't think about it that way.
Yeah, I think it's good you brought up, like, this is potentially like an enterprise headset, because we saw HTC go in that direction like just a couple of years ago. Really, and not too long ago.
That's how Microsoft has gone with the HoloLens too. Like the HoloLens, comma 2, but also the HoloLens 2, the product. Like, they're not really selling it for consumers. In fact, the HoloLens 2 literally costs $3,500, which is the same price tag as the Apple Vision Pro. So just as like a comparison point, other sorts of AR headsets like this cost the same amount. It's not for you. It's not a consumer headset.
So I think it's a little bit wild to say that, though, because all the marketing material we see for this shows seemingly ordinary people, albeit these might be ordinary Silicon Valley people. So, you know, prices are varied there. But ordinary people nonetheless in their living rooms with their dogs and yada yada, like using this device. So anybody watching this marketing materials is going to be like, oh, that's average Joe, that's average like Carrie, like, yeah, that's me. Okay, this headset's, I'm supposed to be maybe part of the target market for this headset. It's not showing like Office Space, you know, guy in like button up and a tie, like handing the headset to somebody else. We get maybe a couple of glimpses of like enterprise uses for it, but a lot of the marketing material we see for this is kind of just normal individuals in their home. So I think that does create a little bit of a like, what? Like,
yeah,
when it comes
there's a bit of a dissonance there.
Yeah, exactly. Like, oh, I'm supposed to be a normal person at home, like being able to look at my photos and reminisce about family times, or I'm about to go to my grandma's like 86th birthday and I'm a normal guy. Like,
yeah, I wonder if maybe there's like a duality here where like I'm a professional for a creative company and the company has paid for me to get the Apple Vision Pro, but also I'm working remote. So on my off time, I still have this headset at home and I am using it for certain, you know, recreational functions, right? So like really they're going to get the majority of sales to businesses, you know, in this sort of enterprise capacity where like, oh, it'll improve the performance of your employees if you give them a headset. And then also maybe enthusiasts, right? The kind of people who would already be willing to buy a $5,000 monitor from Apple just to get like the most pixels. right? Like the craziest fucking color correction, whatever.
Yeah.
And then also like, well, now you have the headset, it's possible to use it in your off time and sort of grow that in like a 2-directional sort of deal where like, it's not selling you, it's not like, as a consumer, you should buy this because it'll be useful in your recreational time. But if you already have it, it is useful in everyday life.
So I think you have a good point there with like using it with remote workers. And that just opened up a new question in my head, because it would be really cool to feel more like you are there with like your coworkers / teammates at times, like especially during meetings where things are, you know, you're just spitballing things, and or it's like some sort of like offsite event where you're all just kind of having fun and trying to like just get to know each other better. Like if you need to be remote, it's better than having this like flat Zoom window that not a lot of people are paying attention to because there's like 20 other real bodies in front of them. Now it's kind of like, oh, okay, like my window is here, or maybe a full body avatar of me is being projected into the space.
Okay, you bring up an interesting point. Like, we've had so much research, you know, because of the pandemic, over like Zoom fatigue and the way that like Zoom doesn't take the place of actual meetings in person, and why is that? And there's a bunch of factors such as like you can't have sidebar conversations. And it really makes me think like the FaceTime aspect was a big part of their presentation of like, hey, this integrates seamlessly. You have the sort of virtual avatar that's very realistic. What is the next step there? Where it's like, if everyone on your team has these headsets, can you suddenly create something that's better than a Zoom / FaceTime, you know, whatever sort of environment? Like, can you get closer to a real meeting and all the benefits that that provides? Can you prevent worker fatigue due to Zoom meetings, etc.? Like, I think that's maybe an unexplored space, and that is maybe the most profitable direction that they could go in terms of developing new software.
Yeah, especially if they want to go towards an enterprise direction, or at least like really give themselves a leg up on the enterprise market. Would be, yeah, fight the Zoom fatigue and, you know, keep facilitating remote work because it does work well, but just iron out those little hiccups in the middle.
I mean, Meta has tried to do that with their Horizons meetings, Horizons workroom,
I think
whatever
it's called workrooms. Yeah.
Workroom. Like, I think they're trying to nail that space too. Like, it's an obvious niche, but also Meta's interpersonal tech kind of sucks. Like I mentioned it at the start, like their avatars are weird and creepy and don't do what they need to do. And so I think that's actually a ripe space for actually nailing it in the way that Apple in the past has sort of nailed these spaces that aren't totally figured out yet.
Yeah, and part of why I'm still excited for this headset, even though I don't think I'll ever own one of these. And if I'm lucky, I'll be able to use it one time. But like, I'm excited for this because this is dedicated to actual like computing stuff and I guess more of the communication side of things. Whereas like the Meta Quest and the Vive and certainly the PSVR, these are all like mostly dedicated, the driving force is going towards gaming. The graphics or, you know, peripherals or whatever, the technology is all going towards how can we make this better for gaming? And this headset is handling something else entirely different. And one thing I'll say there on like the gaming versus whatever this is doing is that I noticed that the head strap looked pretty darn comfortable, but also it was missing a top of the head strap, like a strap that, you know, goes across the top of your dome, presumably to kind of like hold the headset up or stop it from drooping down on your head. And I found it like pretty interesting. Like, I don't know how tight that comfort strap is supposed to be or the headset itself, but the fact that it was just like, yeah, we're just going to wrap around the back of your head, like we don't need to worry about that, seemed fairly interesting.
I think it's quite telling that we haven't really covered some of the like most basic aspects of the form factor of this headset, right? Like we're so focused on the hardware, and yet we haven't really talked about the fact that it is tethered to an external battery. We haven't really talked about the fact that it doesn't have controllers, that it's just vision and voice and hand tracking and gestures and stuff. Like there's fundamental aspects of this headset that we haven't dedicated any time to talking about because it doesn't matter, right? We talked about the price a little bit because that's what everyone's talking about, but like that doesn't matter. I think it's quite telling that these things are bottom of the list because that's not what this headset is focused on. It's not what it's about. Like, whether or not it makes a splash and whether it changes the space that we're thinking about, that we're working in, is not going to hinge on those factors. It's going to hinge on a much more holistic level. You know, it's about the human connection, it's about whether it can integrate the external to the internal and the internal to the external, right? Whether it can like take MR and really make it something that can actually function in our day-to-day lives. Carlos, what are your closing thoughts, you know, to just send out listeners with like a way to think about this headset through all of the news that they've been hearing? How should they think about it?
Some of my thoughts on the Apple Vision Pro is to not be upset that you're not going to buy this headset or use this headset. This is the first of its kind, you know, at least by Apple. It always takes like 3 or more waves in order to get a consumer priced product. Consumer basically meaning like us, not people from Succession on HBO, the people who make like a normal amount of money. It's going to take like, you know, up to the Apple Vision 4 Pro to be able to actually afford this thing. But additionally, unless you're an enthusiast, like now is really not the right time to buy into this. Like if you work at certain companies that can afford it, like maybe you'll experience it. If not, it's fine to wait on this thing. This is not a gaming product. This is something to do more so day-to-day computing, and it's early on. Like we've pointed out, the battery life. This is not going to be your next gaming headset, but this is a very fascinating and cool step in the direction of headsets in general. Like not VR, not AR, MR, whatever freaking 2-letter combination you want to make. This is just a cool idea for a headset, and hopefully we see it iterated on, and it pushes us to an interesting future. Here's the family computer, but in the form of this wearable headset, you know? I think that's kind of the coolest thing of this, is that basically this Apple Pro is trying to do everything that the other headsets aren't necessarily doing. And I say that in a way that doesn't ignore like what has come before it. Like how the movie theater mode is very reminiscent of like big screen and VR or something like that. It's just like, let's see where things go. Let's not turn into these like console war fan people. We don't need that. We just want to see like where technology brings us next, and come at it with a optimistic yet cautious and critical eye.
Well said. I hope this episode has provided a good point of comparison, a good perspective on what to think about the Apple Vision Pro. We'll see you next time.